Palm Sunday, and our theme for Easter is MAGNIFY, a fresh vision of Jesus, and in particular today, it's prophetic vision. There is so much that can be said. There's so many rabbit holes I could go down, but here's a joke for you. Do you know what happens if you pour hot water down a rabbit hole? Hot cross bunnies. So I sat with pages of written notes about Palm Sunday and the significance and fulfillment of prophecy, and the amazing fact that any of these prophecies even happened. As I studied this, it reminded me how much I don't know. It's so amazing that the more you read the Easter story and commentaries, just how amazing it is. If the things I share today do nothing else, what I really hope is that it might encourage you to go home and read and be inspired by this amazing resource we have, the written Word of God. You might wonder why I chose the passage from Luke 24, which happens after the resurrection. To be honest, I think it was the part, "Why are you so foolish?" And every time I read that, it was just like, this whole passage, when I read it, it was like God was just really speaking to me. Personally, I've found some of the things that we've been hearing recently about where the world is heading hard. But as I've been reading all these amazing things this week about all the prophecies that have been fulfilled by Jesus, his love, and what he did for us at Easter, reading about what the environment was like, and remembering that Jesus was a human, just like us, in facing these things. And it's like, duh, there's so much proof, it should be easy and obvious to trust Jesus. One of the things I love about Jesus is that he pulled these guys up on their unbelief as he was walking along the road with them. But he didn't leave them there. He joined them. He talked and he taught them. He walked with them. This is the same Jesus that we get to walk with. So there's two men on the road to Emmaus. They'd been walking with this man. It's quite a long walk, 7 miles. For the young people here, that's like walking from here to McDonald's in Porirua. So they'd had plenty of time to talk. And hearing him talk about the prophecies about the Messiah that had been fulfilled through him, just as they'd been foretold in the Old Testament. But people hadn't been ready to see a suffering Messiah that would rise after 3 days. But I imagine that these guys were pretty encouraged by what they'd heard. They were being reminded of things that they'd already been taught. And I think that they would have been feeling pretty hopeful at the end of that walk. And there they were, they invited this man in to have a meal with them and to stay the night. And this man broke bread with them. Their eyes were opened and they realised it was Jesus. Oh my goodness, off the Richter scale. You know, you're just having lunch and then this guy, and it's Jesus, he reveals himself. This man that they'd been walking with was Jesus. And I love the next bit too, because it made them realise, they said to each other, "Didn't our hearts burn within us when he talked with us on the road and explained the scriptures to us?" This was a God revelation, and now they recognised what was different. How good does it feel when you get a revelation from God? Sometimes we can read a passage many times or hear things and it's good, but sometimes it just really resonates within our spirit and it's super exciting and encouraging. I think the next bit is quite funny. They'd invited this traveller in, who turned out to be Jesus, to stay the night because it was late. And yet, after they realised they'd been talking with Jesus, it says, and within the hour they were on their way back to tell their other disciples. It was late to start off with. And after Jesus disappeared, it was even later. But they just had to get back to Jerusalem and tell the others. They were so excited, and rightly so. I pray today for a fresh personal revelation of what Jesus has done for us, and that this will cause us to have confidence to go and share this good news with people around us. How we see Jesus determines how we live. Our world needs Jesus more than ever, and the message of Easter is a perfect place to start. So back to Palm Sunday and the triumphant entry. As prophesied in Zechariah, the Messiah, in a display of humility and sovereignty, would take his triumphant entry into Jerusalem, and not only fulfilled centuries-old prophecies, but also set the stage for a hugely pivotal week in the history of salvation. When I've asked people what they know about Palm Sunday, they talk about Jesus coming into Jerusalem on a donkey, with lots of people shouting and joyfully praising God. Hosanna in the highest. And from Psalm 118, blessed be the King that comes in the name of the Lord. And they were laying their cloaks and palm branches on the road as they travelled. And that is all true. But something that makes this even more powerful if we take a moment to put the triumphant entry into context. As one commentator said, we have made Palm Sunday a quaint charm of a Middle Eastern travel brochure, picturesque villages, bustling market, smiling children, and Jesus. In reality, it was a hostile environment for Jesus. Many people went to Jerusalem for their ceremonial cleansing before the Passover. They kept looking for Jesus and wondering why he wasn't there. But the chief priests and the Pharisees had put out an order that if anyone saw Jesus, to let them know so that they could arrest him. And when they found out that Jesus was with Lazarus, who'd been raised from the dead, and that lots of Jews were gathering there to see both Jesus and Lazarus, the chief priests and Pharisees wanted to kill both of them. Jesus had to keep alert and on the move. In Matthew 12, we read that they tried to seize him, but he escaped their grasp. Imagine the hostility and danger. We need to remember, though, too, that Jesus was not a victim of circumstance. Everything Jesus does is intentional. His timing is intentional. His movements intentional. His purpose is intentional. In John 6, we read that the people had tried earlier to elevate Jesus as king, but Jesus said, "My time has not yet come." But now his time had come. He not only allowed it, he arranged it. Jesus is a man on a mission, and that mission is coming to a climax this week. So let's look at some prophecy. Conservatively, Jesus fulfilled 300 prophecies during his time on earth. What is a prophecy? Prophecy is fundamentally a message from God. Or in the Bible dictionary, it says the foretelling of future events by inspiration from God. Prophecy always points back to God. Before its fulfillment, prophecy conveys an important message from God. After its fulfillment, prophecy leads praise to God. Fulfilled prophecy proves that God is who he says he is. Through prophecy, God reveals his heart, his plans, and his desires for our lives. It is a powerful expression of his love, showing that he is intimately involved and invested in our well-being. So how sure can we be of what we read in the Bible? The Old Testament Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek by 270 BC. That means that the scriptures were in wide circulation 3 centuries before the Gospel period. Conservatively, they contain more than 300 prophecies detailing the coming Messiah, and many of them were fulfilled in the 1st century. Some are still to come. For those of you who find pictures memorable, Chuck Missler does an example where he has taken 8 of the simplest prophecies concerning Jesus, like that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem. That Jesus would be born in Bethlehem, that Jesus would be coming into Jerusalem on a donkey, that Jesus would be betrayed by 30 pieces of silver, that Jesus would be crucified, even though back when it was written in Psalm 22, crucifixion wasn't even a thing. For each of these 8 prophecies, he put probabilities against them. This demonstrates the chance of something happening. Somewhere I have a jar of gold coins. Now, if you need coins, just saying that Matt collects coins, so he's a good source, so go and see him. And so this jar has 100 coins in it. And I have, actually, we'll take one out, so it's got 99. Because I have one coin which has, I've put a red mark on it. In fact, I've coloured in the kiwi. And if anyone wants to know, there's a really big kiwi in Ekirahuna, so there are some good things in Ekirahuna. Just saying. If you were here last week, you'll get the in joke. But anyway, so 1 in 100 is the chance of putting that in, giving it a good shake, and pulling it out, and it is not the right one. So there you are. 1 chance in 100. So working out the probabilities of each of 8 prophecies Jesus fulfilled happening, being generous with applying the levels of probability, we have a probability of about 1 in 10 to the 17. So that's 1 with 17 zeros after it. Apparently, it's called a 100 quadrillion. That's a rough chance of it happening. 1 in 100 quadrillion. That sounds like quite a big chance, doesn't it? Quite a small chance. How big is that? Chuck used an American state, but we're translating it into New Zealand. So it would mean that if you had a pile of 100 coins, if you had a pile of $1 coins, you piled them 200 high, which would end up about this height, which is about 50 centimetres, and you laid them next to each other over the whole of New Zealand. That's the North Island, the South Island, Stewart Island, that close together, this high, and then you sent someone off to go and choose one coin. The chance of 8 prophecies being fulfilled is this, over the whole of New Zealand, that deep. I don't know about you, but that just makes me in awe of God. That, you know, that shows that the Bible is true. That's what He's told us is true. That all these things that you see will happen. Prophecy gives credibility to the proclamation of the Bible. This demonstrates the confidence that we can have that Jesus Christ is the Messiah who was prophesied in the Old Testament. One of the most astonishing passages in the Bible is the prophecy given to Daniel about the arrival of the Messiah. It is given in weeks and days, and if you want to know how it's calculated, review Matt's recent messages on Daniel. The prophecy said from the date of the decree was given to rebuild Jerusalem to the day the Messiah would present himself as king to Jerusalem would be 173,880 days. That's a huge number. Like, I don't know, I just find it amazing, and it happened just as he said it would. So here's some other prophecies you might recognise about our Messiah. He was born of David's family, born of a virgin, born in Bethlehem, would go to Egypt, minister in Galilee and Nazareth, would teach through the use of parables, be disbelieved and rejected by the religious rulers of that period, and that he would make a triumphant entry into Jerusalem. And that is what we're remembering today. Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. 500 years before it happened, Zechariah prophesied that he would humbly announce himself publicly as a Messiah by riding a lowly donkey into Jerusalem. Zechariah 9:9, look, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, yet he is humble, riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. The triumphal entry is one of the few incidents in the life of Jesus which appears in all four gospel accounts. Jesus sends a couple of his disciples, as we saw this morning, off to get the donkey and its colt. He told them exactly where it would be and what to say, and it happened exactly like that. It wasn't unusual for Jesus to be going to Jerusalem. Reading through the gospel, it always talks about Jesus walking, but today he is riding. When kings were crowned, they would commonly ride in on a mount to distinguish themselves from the rest of the people. So this is one of the ways Jesus is identifying himself as king. Normally, a king would be riding on a horse, perhaps highly decorated and lots of aids around him. Horses represented power and majesty. In the ancient Middle Eastern world, leaders rode a horse if they rode to war, but donkeys if they came in peace. Jesus came in peace. In the Bible, donkeys are characteristically highly esteemed, reflecting a heart that is submissive to God and considerate of others. It was also a colt of a donkey. It had never been ridden before. Apparently donkeys need to be broken in to be ridden. So I wonder if that colt niggled and was a bit antsy about being ridden and struggled with all the noise of everyone shouting. Or if it sensed the significance of the occasion. Jesus also didn't come in royal robes, but on the clothes of the poor and humble. The disciples put their cloaks on the colt, and Jesus sat on them. In Matthew 21:8, we hear a very large crowd laid their cloaks on the road, suppressing the dust, while others cut branches from trees and spread them on the road. Let's think about cloaks for a moment. In biblical times, cloaks were essential garments serving both practical and symbolic purposes. A cloak was typically a large outer garment made of wool or other materials, providing warmth and protection from the weather. But it was also a big deal as an identity. Cloaks were worn by prophets, priests, and leaders, signifying their role in carrying God's will and representing his authority. It told you who you were, like a name. It wasn't just a thin wrap, it was as much as you could afford for quality cloth, and could be highly decorated, different colours, and went with them everywhere. So the fact that they threw them on the road was a sign of real honour and respect for Jesus as he travelled to Jerusalem, recognising him as Messiah and King. Waving and laying palms and other branches on the road was also a traditional way to honour a victorious king or hero, and it signified the people's hope and expectation that Jesus was the promised Messiah. Jesus entered Jerusalem through the East Gate, also known as the Golden Gate, a gate of mercy. It was a gate that was normally used for high priests and the only one in the wall that had a double arch. This is another fulfilled prophecy. Now place yourself in the picture. They're big crowds, they're shouting and singing, people are taking off their cloaks, placing them on the roads, bringing branches to lay on the road too. Probably people who didn't even believe Jesus but got excited and the hubbub joined in. Everyone is joining in. At long last, their Messiah has arrived. But as we've been learning lately, sometimes things happen in a different way to what we expect. The people were expecting someone who would deliver them from pagan rulers, and the Romans were making life miserable for the Jews. But then we go through this final week, and then their Messiah is crucified. Even the disciples didn't understand until after the resurrection. In John 12, verse 16, we read, the disciples did not understand at first, but when Jesus was glorified, then they remembered that this had been written about and that they had done these things to him. That's the same for us sometimes, isn't it? Sometimes it's hard to see at the time, but looking back, we see what God was doing and how things fit into place. So what are we to do with this? We've looked at Jesus' triumphant journey into Jerusalem, which we remember as Palm Sunday. And there's so much more to the story that we haven't mentioned. There's a lot of rabbit holes I could have gone down. Like the Pharisees trying to get Jesus to stop praising him, and Jesus weeping as he went into Jerusalem. Mary's extravagant pouring of expensive perfume on Jesus and the significance of that, and so much more. But you can read about that yourself. We've looked at the prophecy and how God uses it as a way to speak to us, to reveal his heart and his plans. We've considered the incredible fulfillment of prophecy that can fill us with confidence that Jesus is who he said he was. What's our response going to be? How we see Jesus determine how we live our lives. We can choose denial. We can say that it wasn't that he isn't who he said he was. We can choose delusion. We can make Jesus into someone that we want him to be. Maybe like Santa, we can just, when times are tough, we can ask for things but ignore them the rest of the time. Or we can choose dedication, giving our lives to the right kingdom. When we consider all that Jesus did for us when he went to the cross to die, so that we can have a reconciled relationship with God and rose again, there's more on that coming. When we consider the pain Jesus went through, remembering that when he was here on earth, he was a man. He felt pain like us. When we consider the evidence, that 1 in 100 quadrillion chance of even 8 prophecies being fulfilled, but at least 300 were. When we consider the men on the road to Emmaus and how they said, "Didn't our hearts burn when he was talking to us?" The joy of revelation of God's word for us personally. What will you do with that? Maybe you don't yet have a relationship with Jesus. There's an opportunity for you to accept Jesus' invitation this morning. It's not complicated. If you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. If you want to respond to the invitation this morning, come and talk to someone. Or maybe just say to the person next to you, "I want that." And for those of us already on the journey with Jesus, it's easy to listen and then just walk away, even with good intentions, and not take action. I want to challenge you to have a look through the scriptures about Easter and find one aspect that catches you and write about it. How about a 5-minute talk or fill an A4 page? Your challenge is to fill 1 page. Maybe it's a verse that stands out. Maybe you put yourself in a scene, or think about how the events are connected, or consider all the things that Jesus did between Palm Sunday and his resurrection the following week. Maybe as you do that, the scriptures will come alive, or you'll have a fresh revelation. And then, when you've done that, share it with someone. Share it at your home group. Watch out, my home group. Young people, share it at Easter camp. Share it with someone who doesn't yet know Jesus. I've been able to share some of the things I've been learning with people who don't yet know Jesus. Don't let this just be another Easter. God loves you. Give God the honour and opportunity to speak to you as you spend time with him, thinking about this most precious of gifts, the opportunity for restored relationship with God because of Easter.